This video is about healthcare options later in life. You know, the more options you have, the better, right? You need to know this stuff beforehand, not find out through the school of hard knocks later. And I'm going to base this on two things. My wife and I were healthcare agents named in the living will of two of our older relatives. One was 92 years old, and he was found in his house after having a stroke. We checked on him and had somebody check on him. He's not in our town, but another town. And he was in the hallway all night long. And they rushed him to the hospital and did everything they could for him. He was in rehab at a nursing home. And we got a call at 4 o'clock in the morning, 4 a.m. And they said he had a second massive stroke. And we were the healthcare agent and the family contact. And we rushed down there, about an hour and a half trip. Got there, talked to the doctor. The doctor told us the bad news. We were in agreement, and we had his living will with us, and he had told us he didn't want to be resuscitated or, on life support, that sort of thing. So everybody was in agreement, and treatments were started, or not treatment, but that plan of action was started, I should say, no treatments. And so we took a break and went down to the cafeteria after several hours to get a cup of coffee and a bite to eat. Came back, and there was a new shift at the hospital that had started. And unfortunately, they started treatments again. They started doing tests and giving food and trying to do what they could to resuscitate. And my wife, I'm so proud of her, she stepped forward and said, what are you doing? What are you doing? This is hard enough to decide the first time, and you're starting again. Stop it. And they did. And that was our experience at number 2. I volunteered for the end-of-life organization of my state, and I served on their task force for 2 years. I'll tell you more about that. But I learned a lot of lessons that I want to share with you in the video today. So hopefully you can give me your feedback and some discussions, and let's talk about it. Why did this become important to me? Well, just because Marianne and I served as healthcare agents for 2 older relatives. That was why. I wanted to learn more about it. I really did. So I volunteered for our state's end-of-life options organization. I spent 2 years there. Well, the biggest surprise was there's so many options available. And if you don't know about these options until you're faced with them, it's going to be too late. So I want to share those with you. One of the things I did was read a book, a wonderful book, and it's Being Mortal by Atul Gandhi. I'll put it up on the screen. And it was recommended by the state organization. It's been recommended by so many people, and it shows you options the last part of your life that you have that you didn't realize you had. And I'm going to share 3 things with you right now. One thing is doctors are not really trained in end-of-life situations. They're trained in medical school to keep you going at all costs. I mean, that's just the way it is. The guy that wrote the book is a doctor. And he said they had no training at all in end of life. And so medicines are here to keep you going. And these days we have some wonderful, medicines and doctors, and they do a great job of keeping you going. Maybe your quality of life suffers. And so medicine focuses on survival. Quality of life, let's talk about that. If you end up in a hospital bed, like I saw these 2 people did, hooked up to machines and everything, there's no quality of life at all. The old days, people used to die at home, have relatives come visit and have a peaceful death. And when they were dead, you were dead. These days, they're hooked up to so many machines that keep you going. They actually, think about that, they have a hard time telling if a person is alive or dead. I mean, that's not too good. So I think quality of life is something that people want more of, that's something you can do something about. You could go home and get hospice at home. That's certainly an option you can go for. There's medical aid in dying, MAID, M-A-I-D. That's legal in 9 states and the District of Columbia. But that's what people think about when they think about end of life. But there's many more options. One of the things I mentioned just then was dying at home. You can die at home and have hospice. Hospice is a wonderful thing. They administer palliative care to make you comfortable and not suffer. You can elect not to keep being treated. That's a big decision right there. Do you want to keep being treated for everything over and over again as long as you can? That's something you need to think about yourself and tell others as well that may be looking after you as your healthcare agent at the end of your life. Do you want to keep hooked up to all the machines and just keep going? Because that's what will happen. That's what will happen unless somebody steps forward. They'll just keep you going, just like Marianne had to step forward at the hospital. And that's what they're trained to do. And so I think people are so conditioned to trust the doctors, and I trust my doctor. I trust doctors. But you have to realize their mission is to keep you going. So sometimes that will result in needless suffering and loss of contact with people, and you're isolated maybe in a hospital room or something like that. And I think a lot of people are starting to question if that's really what they want. Now, the doctors don't always tell you the situation. They're people too. They give you no training as a doctor about end of life, and it's hard to sit there eyeball to eyeball and tell someone you have a limited time or we've really explored everything. There's always false hope that pops up, and people, they want to try everything, of course, if it will work. But at some point in time, rather than actually dealing with the truth to you, they may say there's one more thing we could try. And a lot of times it was pointed out in the book, that really is not, they know it's not going to work. It's not going to work, but they just can't come to grips with telling you, that you're probably going to be dying. I think people need to make a decision. I've seen a lot of people make those decisions and call off the extended life machines and just go home and get hospice. And I think that's a choice you can make. That's one of the main choices I learned about. Another main thing I learned, and I kind of already knew this, was advanced care directives. They used to call them living wills. And here you designate a person who's willing and able to act as your proxy when you can't make healthcare decisions. And this is extremely important. You need to pick a person who can be a healthcare advocate for you, like Marianne was, and she stepped forward. I was really proud of her. You have to step forward and say, wait a minute, this is not what the person wants. You need to stop or go or whatever, but you need to understand what the person wants if you're a healthcare advocate. And they call that having the conversation. And what that means is talking frankly to the person that's going to be your healthcare advocate. And it's not just filling out a form. I think many people, they go to an attorney and they get the will drawn up, right? And the attorney says, oh, okay, there's another form you need to fill out, and that's called a healthcare directive. Well, there's a lot more to it, and you could research that and find out the different options you could have. Do you want do not resuscitate? You want to keep going at all costs? The form actually has a place you can write this in your own words, your own instructions. I learned about that, and I think that's very important to have that. It's not just a form, it's something that really makes a difference. And that conversation you need to have, you need to make sure that person is willing to serve and also willing to fulfill your wishes. So maybe they believe something different than you, as long as they are willing to take action on your wishes, not their wishes. So that's very important. The conversation also should involve all family members. I mean, you could have a separate conversation with your healthcare agent. Also, talk to all the family members at one time, if you can. They say these holidays that come up, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, anytime there's a big family gathering, is absolutely a wonderful time to have these discussions and let people know. Because if you have a healthcare agent, but you have a strong-willed family member that says, no, Johnny didn't want that. They don't want that. They want something different. Everybody will remember the same story. So that really can avoid problems. So I would highly recommend that. The last thing I want to talk to you about is talking about death. I did a video earlier about the harsh realities of being a 77-year-old man. And I started off with talking about, the fact that, time is limited. And I try to turn it into a positive at the end and talk about living in the present and making the most of every day and having gratitude and things like that. And that'll probably happen in this video as well. But avoiding the subject can cause, confusion and stress and not knowing all your options if you don't discover them. One of the things that all these organizations have is something called a death cafe. Now, this is not anything weird. Every major city has a death cafe. If you'd like to go to one, just search for your city plus death cafe. And they talk about end-of-life options and death. They do. The more you talk about it, the less fearful you are. And you don't have to do this month after month. Just do it a couple of times just to understand different options and the different ways people feel about this. And they actually have a death over dinner, believe it or not, meeting. And I did one in my house called a death with the desserts. And I invited 13 other people to my sunroom, and I was in charge, and we talked about it. There's a book called Death Over Dinner, and I used that as the outline for this, and it turned out really well. Everybody really enjoyed that meeting. Only one person said they wouldn't want to do it again because they felt they had everything properly in order, and good for them. Some people think about this earlier than others. So the others said, let's have another meeting. We never did have another meeting, but I thoroughly enjoyed that meeting. It was very unique and very honest. People shared, and that's the important thing. There's actually a death with death deck card game. it has like 52 cards. I pulled out a couple here, and we played that during the meeting. Just grab a card and you honestly answer. You don't know what the card's going to say, and you pull it out. Time-wise, what would be the best way to die? A, B, C. Instantly, without warning or pain. A. B. Within 3 months of a diagnosis, uncomfortable but able to do a few last things. Or C. After a year of terminal illness, in pain, but time for my family and me to prepare. This is kind of going to be my last in the series here of the end-of-life options. I mean, what was negative was sitting at the hospital watching these people, gasping for air. I mean, that was negative. I want to avoid that if possible. So that's the reason I researched this. So I wanted to share this with you. If you have any questions, put it down in the comments, or let me know if you thought too much about some of these things. Have you made preparations? Okay, please join me next time, and we're going to have something entirely different to talk about. This is Robert. Thanks for watching.